The way that I sound is something that I've created because it soothes me. And I love the way you listen, because you listen with full focus. Our job is to seduce the listener into listening to us. You can see I've done this many times.
So Stewart Pearce, it's an honour and a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for agreeing to this interview.
Hey, it's cool. It's really wonderful to be here.
I learned so much from you from our first meeting. You've worked with some really esteemed people, many of which are famous. You first coached the late Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. That must have been a real moment for you to go from being an actor to then making the transition to serving the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady. What was that like?
Well, of course, she wasn't the Iron Lady then. This was epoch-making history, in the sense that he was the first female Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And we know that there was a very difficult challenge within central government in Britain at that time, well, actually in the United Kingdom. And because of what had taken place in prior regimes. And suddenly here was this extraordinary human being stepping forward with the power that she had to bring about change. Because there were black garbage bags piled up outside the Houses of Parliament, and we were on the brink of a general strike. I mean, that's how severe it was. And Margaret, as the mother that she was, as the housewife that she was, as the scientist that she was, come on, let's get going and sort this out. She was extraordinary.
She has such a determined nature.
She was courageous, yes, very courageous. You see, immensely bright, a genius from the mental body point of view. So she already had ideas about what she would like to negotiate. But she realized that what she needed to do was to deal with all of the damage liability process first, because of what had taken place through the Labour Party regime. Rather similar to today, actually. Government was in crisis. So she stepped forward. It was a huge honor for me. I mean, I was, as you've just said, during the 70s, I was an actor. And then I moved through a rather tragic circumstance with my mother dying, and I nursed her for a year. And then suddenly it was a question of, well, I've lost my agent, I've lost my manager, I've been out of work for over a year. What am I going to do? And out of the blue, the telephone rang. And here was this extraordinary human being that had mentored me at the Royal Shakespeare Company, who had always been a huge presence in my life, who was one of the leading voice coaches of the English-speaking theatre world, the late lamented Cicely Berry, saying, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm not doing anything, I'm being this. And she said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I don't know. I've lost my manager, I've lost my agent. And she said, come and teach for me. And there's this woman that I want you to meet. I'm a diehard socialist. I don't want to work with her. You go and meet her. She's just become the Prime Minister, the leader of the Conservative Party. 2 weeks later, I walked into Downing Street.
Wow. What was that first encounter like? And what was Margaret Thatcher's voice like at the time, comparatively to how it was after you'd coached her?
Well, she was bold and generous and gregarious. So her voice was always placed far forward. But it had that sort of slightly middle-class, patronizing tone that she'd obviously gathered together at Oxford, because that was the sound, that was the lingua franca that was around in Oxbridge at that time. And she was a Lincolnshire lass who was an intelligent person that had socially aspired into that milieu, So obviously she developed this sort of sound, rather like so. And her voice had very little weight. So it didn't really have the gravitas of a leader. And that was my first objective, to give her some weight. And that was fun, because we would go into the Commons late at night when the sessions had finished. And she would stand at one end and I would stand at the other. And I would train her to bowl her voice along the floor. And because she was so sensorily open and very sensual within her body, although we always see her as being slightly overly precious, perhaps, and particularly in terms of the way that her image was cultivated, and that rather fast walk where she always slightly leaned forward with her handbag. She was great fun. So we got on well. But I was very receptive to her. I remember the night before going, I said, look, I'm really nervous. What should I say? And the partner that I was living at that time said, why don't you try listening? And so I went and I listened. And at the end of the first session, she said to me, Stewart, it's been so charming working with you, but I love the way you listen. Because you listen with full focus.
I remember hearing you say before that Margaret Thatcher's voice was first received as quite patronising. And I tend to think of things in terms of psychological opposites, of the sort of masculine, feminine principle. Do you think that's what you helped Margaret Thatcher to do, to harmonise, to draw the masculine and the feminine together? Because she did have this higher note voice, and then, as you described, helping her to bowl her voice through the room.
The way that I would approach answering your question is that she was being depended upon as being the great pope. And that puts a lot of pressure onto the leader. That means a lot of tension. And so I remember in the early stages of our work, what I did was to relax her, to teach her how to breathe so that she could feel more relaxed within, so that she could really feel her voice in a much weightier position in her center, what I refer to as finding our note, our signature sound, rather than constantly talking up here and losing ourselves in the air, in the cerebrum, of really coming into this place here. And she began to relax, and she had a wonderful sense of humor. So I was constantly saying, are you sure? Or telling little stories that were jokes, and she would laugh, and this would relax her more. So my job was really about allowing her to feel more integrated and less pressured, because when she was pressured, as we all saw, she could become condescending.
Right.
She was a genius, there is no doubt. And it's very difficult if you're a genius to embrace other people who are perhaps less intelligent than yourself, because there's a level of impatience that, can we get on? Can we get on with my genius? I feel that was her downfall towards the end of her administration, because the men did not know, the cabinet did not know how to approach her, because she was formidable, powerful. She was an empress on an archetypal level.
It really makes me wonder the effect that our voices have, and how they're received by the recipient, the world.
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? Today, because our world is so noisy, we're competing with the noise, whether it's the noise of the machines or the noise of our own intellect. Doing. Am I good enough? I don't feel good enough. What do I need to do to be better? Etc., etc. We simply become very, very tense. And as a result of that, we diminish our voices, or we become aware of the power of our voices to really enrapture the person that we're sharing with. And of course, there are degrees to that. Formal speech and informal speech. But I always remember as a very young person meeting Laurence Olivier, who was still alive at that time. The great actor, Sir Laurence Olivier, who was considered to be the doyen of the stage, so to speak. And I would sit and listen to him speak, because he loved to tell stories like most actors. And on one particular occasion, somebody said something about, oh, Larry, you've always had a very big voice. You could always be heard. He said, our job as actors is not to be heard. Our job is to seduce the listener into listening to us.
Ah.
And that was a eureka moment for me, because it's about, what do these people wish to receive? How can I entice? How can I seduce? How can I enchant? How can I inform? How can I allow them to feel that this is possibly the most specific moment of this meeting by the way that I use my voice?
Is that note that you talk about, the feeling intuitive, the voice of the heart, when people finding their own note, is that the feeling intuitive voice instead of, rather than the...
It is a physical sensation, but of course, as soon as we make it, it is like a key that opens up the subtle feeling process of our being, both physiologically and emotionally, which then opens up the great doorway of our intuition, the great inner teacher within all of us, who then speaks. And if we're living in the moment and we're being completely spontaneous, because we're living in the moment, are not preoccupied with, how are you perceiving me? Is this right? Am I doing it? Is everything okay? But really feeling what the contact is between you and I, or myself and you, or whomever I'm speaking to. Automatically we're intuiting all of that subtle information. And the way that it can be really focused is through our voices. Why? Because sound is at the core of creation. And so in all wisdom traditions around the world, there is this belief that all of this came into creation through sound. The very first thing that we achieve as little human mites, as we shoot out of our mother's birth canals or are lifted from her belly, is to the great roar of life. You know, we promulgate ourselves in the world through sound. And then we go on sounding. So we make love, we buy a cappuccino, we create war, we resolve crises, all by using our voices. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. So if that is so, I feel that we need to be more aware of the richness of the way that our voices function.
So when things are out of harmony, you know, now I recall you speaking about unconscious acoustic dissonance. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, it's really what I was saying just now, isn't it? About the fact that we're so surrounded by noise, externally or internally, that we are moving into a dissonance where our perceptual faculties are really closing down. I mean, the more we make this sound, which is this sound, I mean, I spent a lot of time in the United States of America and in New York City. I mean, everybody's like this, you know what I'm saying? So the more we do this, the more we focus just sound into this part of our bodies, where there isn't the full breath supporting the sound, where there isn't a feeling of earth within our sound. It's just caught in the fire and the air of this quality of ecstasy, which is all to do with, I've got to do this as fast as I possibly can. We start to close off vital pathways of energy within our bodies. And particularly, it's being found that the neural pathways between throat, where we make sound, obviously within the larynx, and the inner ear, these are becoming calcified. So we have less ability to really tune into the specificity of sound and how your voice is affecting me as you speak to me, or not, whatever the case may be. And how can we ameliorate all of that? How can we augment it? How can we improve it? How can we allow ourselves to become optimized and excellent in the way that we use our voices? Which is not by shouting at one another or doing this, you know?
That nasal twang, the sort of pharynx and nasal twang, you know, it doesn't penetrate. It's repulsive, isn't it? It's very off-putting. But what does penetrate is a voice like Margaret Thatcher's. Okay, albeit she was Prime Minister, but speaking from that depth, even very gently.
It comes from the over-cerebralization, because we're just focusing on this particular aspect of our bodies, and we're completely unconscious of it. We're educated, socialized, and conditioned into just doing. And then suddenly we become aware of our hearts, or we become aware of our solar plexus because we're feeling nervous or frightened or uneasy, or madly in love, or excited, or full of joy. But these energies, as you well know as a therapist, these energies are actually, they're not educated, or they're not investigated, or they're not freely opened. Unless we move into tragedy, we move into desperation. But at school, I was never shown how to be inspirational. And when you think about the word inspiration, inspirare, inspirazione, to breathe in is to inspire, to breathe out is to expire. Inspirare in Latin, meaning of divine influence. If only I'd been taught that. It says at the beginning of the Old Testament, just to quote the Judeo-Christian tradition, and God breathed on the surface of the waters and brought forth life. And God breathed into the nostrils of man, and man became a living soul. So the formulae that I'm opening up is very simple, or the equation that I'm opening, which is that if we're fully breathed, if we really know how to open up all of our breath, not just by pumping air into the stomach, but by opening the ribcage, and then into the upper abdominal wall, we become so full of oxygen that we have a support mechanism for the way that we then deliver the way we wish to sound our ideas and feelings and thoughts and concepts to whomever we're speaking to. And it liberates us, do you see? We become very free. Our consciousness expands, and suddenly the brilliance of who we are as human beings drops into a fully embodied state of being, so our voices always reflect that. I mean, I know I'm sort of marrying many concepts into that one particular paragraph, but I'm sure you see.
I see.
Does it make sense?
I see what you're saying. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. I mean, that liberating, freeing nature, I appreciate some things are difficult to make explicit and some things are ineffable and obviously deeply personal. What was the moment you knew that your voice had become freed, liberated from perhaps being extinguished?
Well, I've always talked a lot. Surprise, surprise. But what I talked about as a child, most people did not understand, because I was talking about what I was seeing in the world intuitively, in the multidimensional nature of the way that I was perceiving, because I had a very open intuition, a very open psyche. So to answer your question directly, by the time I became 8 years of age, because academia or education was very challenging, I couldn't do what they wanted me to do. So I couldn't read. I couldn't do basic math. And the reason being is that I'm profoundly dyslexic. But we didn't know about that then. So they beat intelligence into you. So I was always being beaten or punished or excoriated by people's voices. You should be ashamed of yourself. And pitched against my brother, who's slightly older and who was brilliant, who was facile about all of the educational or the academic processes. So I thought, well, the simplest thing to do is to take attention away from me. So I shut up. About 8 years of age. I just thought, this is ridiculous. I'm just going to shut up. So I looked at my brother and said, I'm going to shut up. And he said, what? And I said, I'm going, or whatever that banter between siblings was. You are now going to be my code breaker. Apparently I used that word, code breaker. We have a psychic connection. So I would look at him and he would know what I was thinking or feeling. What Stewart wants is, Mum, that sort of thing. So what it did was it made me really still. I just observed. I didn't have to be the protagonist. For 2 years, I remained silent. And I got heavy, grounded. I came in. And then I began to see the people who were loving. I saw them very clearly, why they were loving, why they were caring, and why they were so joyous. And the people that were punishing me, they were fearful people. So I began to see energy around them. And then I'd had enough of that. So I couldn't speak because I had literally, my vocal cords were, as it were, ossified. I hadn't spoken for 2 years. And of course, I'm shorthanding the story because there was a great deal of fear in my parents about the fact that I wasn't speaking, that I was mute suddenly. And so I was taken off for psychiatric testing, and that was all really traumatic. But fortunately, I had a very loving mother who just kept supporting and supporting. And then I remember one afternoon, she was driving, I was in the back of the car, and we were going somewhere really enjoyable. And I suddenly started to, she nearly crashed the car. I hadn't sounded at all for 2 years. Wow. And she said, "Darling, you're speaking." I said, so I spoke for some months through song, through Sprechgesang, sing speak.
Yeah.
And then she said, "I think you should be in a choir, a church choir." Yes! Because I loved sound and I saw sound. I'm a synesthete, so I have a crossover of the senses, so I see sound as waves of energy.
Wow.
And so I was put into the choir, but of course, although I thought we all looked wonderful, because I love the white ruff and the white surplices and the cassocks and the whole paraphernalia of the liturgy, I would have the book in my hand, but I couldn't read it. So I would just copy the boys. But then suddenly, the waves of sound as I saw it, they became notes, they became words, and the words dropped into me, and I started reading, singing, and then could read in speech. So that was the turning point, where sound, for me, took on a non-corporeal or supernatural force. And then, of course, my intelligence, my consciousness developed, this very unique connection between language and thought. And words became these fascinating vessels of communicating. Both my parents were great storytellers, whether it was literally a reading, the Grimm's fairy tales or My Dear Mother, or in social situations. My father was a bon viveur, so he was always telling stories. And the words that were being used, I always remember the first time I heard the word, it's not English, it's French, but mélange. And I just thought it was one of the most beautiful things that I heard. So I put it into every sentence until my mother said, "Darling, what are you talking about?" And I said, what do you mean? She said, "Well, what does the word mean?" And I said, "Oh, I don't really know." And she said, "Good, it means," and then showed me that the pure beauty of the sound was anchored in sense. So I was able to be judicious about the use of mélange. Or I remember another word, sounds so crazy now, insignificant. I thought insignificant. I thought the sound was just exquisite.
There's so many sounds in one word. It's wonderful.
Yeah. So that's where it really started. And then, of course, schooling, I went through, and somebody said, there's something about your voice when it broke, because puberty set in very early. And so the weight in my voice, this baritone sound that I have, was there at the age of 11, 12. And somebody said, there's something about your voice. Now, I had never been approved of before. So the fact that I was being approved of, I went with it. Let's celebrate this. And then somebody said, "Why don't you go to the drama group at high school?" And I thought, I don't know what that is. So I went, and somebody said, "You're an actor." I was just being natural and playing. And so I thought, oh, this is the way to go, because obviously I'm not going to be academic.
There's such a difference between academia and education. Education meaning to draw out. And I think that's what you did. You really drew out your voice, and then realized you could polish this gift and then offer it to others.
And at that time, which means the 50s and the 60s, there were some great voices around, either in the field of politics or on the stage. I mean, great voices that had a quality of self-consciousness about them, because we used our voices to really ratify our status at that time. That seems to have been forgotten. Everything's become ironed out. But, and I'm not getting caught up in the snobbery of socialism, in the sense of, it's true that in order to be effective in society, you needed RP, received pronunciation, or standard English. And that if you were brought up using a dialect or an accent, people ironed out their voices to become more standardized. which is something that I taught for years, of course, teaching young actors, particularly an actor from Bolton in Lancashire, and they could only use this sound. That doesn't allow you to play high status in social situations, particularly if you're playing historic drama.
So a voice that needs a range of different characters.
Yeah, exactly. So the first thing
that
that the young actors would be taught is receive pronunciation, not devaluing their own dialect, but so that they could be bilingual, do you see? Because the lingua franca was that you needed to receive pronunciation. It's less so today. Our society has changed in its sound making so radically.
Copying and emulating another's voice, such as Meryl Streep in The Iron Lady and Gillian Andersen in The Crown, remarkable performances, but obviously emulating another's voice, as wonderful as it is very different from accessing your own true note, isn't it? Sure.
Well, no. Yes, no, yes, no.
Yes and
At
no.
the heart of great acting is a truth of feeling statement.
Yeah.
So Gillian and Meryl have a way of being able to tune into who they are as human beings, that they've explored the interior of their beings through the substance of life, and particularly when they've been pressured, because can we stand up to those pressures, or do we lose all of our power and then become, quivering idiots, as it were? I mean, that's rather crude, but, Firstly, who am I? Who is this person that I'm playing? And they have the abilities we see because they're notable. We see them playing a lot of roles. They have this ability to transform. Imaginatively, they conceive of a physical characterization, they conceive of a vocal characterization, which is not putting on, it's derived from the interior of the way that they feel and think about the person that they're playing, which of course is determined largely by the script. Now, as far as dialect is concerned, or, for example, Meryl as an American, as a New Jersey lass, finding Margaret Thatcher's voice, she worked with a dialect coach who she has known for many, many years, who knows her voice very well and was actually able to show her how melodic patterns could be used that were not superimposed on, but derived from the way that she felt about playing the person. Do you see?
I do, yeah.
So it's all about the interior world.
So to go from coaching Margaret Thatcher to then working with Princess Diana.
It's a big step. Yes, dramatically different.
What was that like for you to encounter Diana?
Well, just extraordinary. It was what an honor, what an honor, what an honor. I mean, really, it was not something that I chose consciously about, I want to do this, I want to do this with my life. The universe, literally, just the wheel of fortune turned and there was this opportunity. So I just embraced it. Diana was extraordinary. Diana was one of the most beautiful, one of the most sensitive, one of the most loving, one of the most fun people that I've ever worked with. And it was just extraordinary for me to come along at that particular time of her life, because I came along in the latter part of 95, in the autumn of 95, just after the Martin Bashir Panorama interview had been broadcast. So I met her at that time, and then it was a question of, well, what do you want to do in the world? She'd already established herself in this charitable status, in this benevolent status, and she wanted to increase all of that. So it was a question of, well, how can I serve you in this? And particularly apropos formal speech, meaning public speaking, I stepped in to help her stand in front of a large group of people. She'd already had prior advice from another voice coach, but I stepped in and just polished it all off so that she could feel easy about focus, easy about looking at the audience that she was speaking to rather than hiding in the piece of paper or hiding behind her eyes, which she did which was not really an adequate, full illustration of who she was, which was this multidimensional, fun-loving, loving individual, working a level of intelligence which was very different from a lot of the people that she was surrounded by, because she was a sensitive, she was an empath. So she could walk into a room and ascertain the feeling in the room and knew exactly how to relax or to heal someone.
It's a very feeling intuitive again.
So intuitive.
Yeah.
So we were very similar on that level. I mean, Diana was Diana and Stewart was Stewart, but we were able to really match in the most extraordinary way.
What was that first encounter like when you first met her?
Well, I was introduced by someone who had become a patroness of mine, who was a wonderful lady who, alas, is now passed, but a lady called Mara Burney, who owned the San Lorenzo restaurant on Beecham Place in Knightsbridge, where, you know, it was the place where you went to meet, you know, if you were of a certain social standing. So many stars and celebs went there. And she said, "Darling, there's someone I want you to meet." And I said, "What for?" She said, "Well, they need your skills." So I said, "Okay, who is it?" She said, "Well, why don't you come for lunch?" She was very seductive because the food was just extraordinary in this restaurant. "Why don't you come for lunch?" And I said, "But can't you tell me who it is? Do you trust me?" And I said, "Yes." So I went for lunch and walked into the restaurant feeling a sense of anticipation, a feel of intrepidation. And then there was the head waiter saying, "Madame is downstairs in the salon privé." And I thought, oh, so it's all very private. So I went down and knocked on the door, opened the door, and there was Mara and there was Diana. I was set up.
Were you shocked?
I said, I think I really wanted to use an expletive, but I think I said shit or something, you know, something much worse than that. And Diana just came forward and grabbed my arm, and there was her face, these extraordinary eyes, these blue eyes saying, "You will work with me, won't you? Mara's told me all about you. And just in meeting you, I just feel you. You're just so wonderful." So we sat down and had lunch and then decided, of course I said yes, but I have parameters. And the chief parameter was, this is going to be completely confidential.
Yeah.
I won't come to KP, Kensington Palace. Come to me. I live in Chelsea. I have a studio there. And so, "Oh, good. I go to Chelsea Harbour Club to work out or swim every morning." She was a water baby. She had to swim every day. And then she would come and see me, you know, and we would do the stuff.
Wow.
So it was privy, you see, it was completely confidential. Why?
Confidential.
Because her life was a circus with all of the paparazzi.
With enormous pressure.
And all of that criticism. She just was a hypersensitive individual that needed to find a way of organizing the way that she was feeling. And she'd been to many therapists, so of course she had a pantechnicon of information, a compendium of information, but it wasn't fully embodied. So I said, "Have you ever thought of stillness, for example? What's it like to be still? What does that mean?" she said. And so we worked on stillness. And that calmed the energy down within. It was rather like a raging torrent of feeling.
So the stillness, receptivity, and then also helping with the voice.
Yeah. And then, of course, as soon as we become still, we become freer within. It's easier to breathe. We access the breath very fully in the way that I was just speaking about it, of breathing wide and deep, you know, opening up the ribcage, feeling the breath into the abdomen, and then using it, and really using it through the heart. So I think I've shared this with you before, I quote Rumi, the great poet. "If words arise from the heart, they enter the heart. If words arise from the tongue alone, they don't pass beyond the ears. So all we do is end up shouting like this, you know, and we all know how irritating that is. But if we can really sit in the center of our sounds and use the breadth of it which is what I showed Margaret and all the people that I've worked with over the years.
It's this over fascination with needing to be informed and needing to sound intelligent or needing to sound academic, which is nothing to do with the voice of the heart, is it? It's all cerebral bump information that's received externally.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from within, but this gift that you have in helping people to polish and then access their notes is very valuable.
So really we're talking about complete authenticity, aren't we? Do you see?
Yeah.
And we're talking, in being authentic, we're talking about being completely present.
Yeah.
If we're really present in the moment, even if we're feeling nervous, we can feel our physiology grounded, earthed, reasonably relaxed, even if there's still, oh my God, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on? And then we really begin to feel these muscle memories of where is my breath, where is my, oh, I can feel the sound here. And we start to speak from here. We suddenly feel powerful. We see the effect it has on someone because it draws them in, it's magnetic. And then, of course, the ideas drop in and we become original because we're being authentic, because we're being present. And as a result of that, if we can just live this, we have presence. Meaning that if you're living a life that is formal, as indeed Diana was, or many of the actors that I work with, how do they walk on a stage just by walking on a stage and arrest the attention of the audience, not the spectator, the audio, just by walking on stage? Well, if that individual is aware of how present they can be in the stillness of their being, in the authenticity and the authority and the authorship of their being, they find their persona, which means in Latin, through sound, persona, through sound, which is the root of our word personality, meaning the quality, the essence, the fabric of someone's being.
The authority of their being.
Yeah, the authorship.
The authorship. You mentioned working with other famous actors, and you're involved with the Shakespeare Globe Theatre. Vanessa Redgrave, Terence Stamp, Mark Rylance, my personal favourite. James Earl Jones, once the voice of Darth Vader, but you helped him later in his career in the theatre. Can you tell us a bit about some of the other actors?
Well, there have been so many, bless them. There are so many. And for me, although they have these great iconic names, they're human beings. And so I serve on that level. I serve that quality of their functioning. How do you feel? Of what use can I be? What service can I be to you? And so there are myriad stories. But it's always about allowing the person to feel that they're enough, because often they're not feeling enough. I remember years and years and years ago working with Glen Close, who was playing Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire here at the National Theatre. Now, Glen is a really accomplished actress and also a singer. So she has a great technique vis-a-vis her voice, but she gained bad notices in this particular show. So she lost her voice.
Gosh.
And I was drawn in for damage liability, for stuff busting on that level. What's gone wrong, so that she could get on that evening to play Blanche Dubois.
Wow.
And I sat with her. I must admit, I walked into the meeting remembering Fatal Attraction. Do you remember?
I do.
She was so terrifying in Fatal Attraction.
I know.
This mad woman. And she was absolutely charming. So I said, what do you feel is going wrong? Because you speak of it as being inoperative. And she said, I don't really know, because I'm breathing well, I'm positioning my sound well. And so I thought, okay, she's being affected by the damning criticism out there rather than functioning within here. So I simply said, tell me, what would you like to do with your audience? So I turned the whole thing around. And she said, I would like to rearrange my audience on a cellular level.
Wow.
And her voice dropped right in to her power. And she wept with joy. So stop thinking about the criticism and start working on the power of the enchantress that she was, the power of that siren that she was, and all the emotional degrees that were apparent in the character. Do you see? It comes back to what I was sharing at the beginning about Laurence Olivier. What I want to seduce my listener into listening to me. So how outrageous can I be? How free can I be? How powerful can I be? How dynamic can I be? How beautiful can I be? How exquisite can I be? What is permissible in the playing of that role? So right at the heart of it is fundamental generosity.
I wanted to ask you, Stewart, what can people do to access that part of themselves, to access their notes? Some people use meditation, some prayer, some quiet contemplation. What can people listening do to access that vital part of themselves?
Well, we're talking about the vitality of our beings, aren't we?
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I feel, where we begin. That's the sort of doorway to enter and fully answer the landscape of your question. So we're talking really about that fundamentally, and to recognize that our voices are purely physical means that we use to create the way we think and the way we feel, to express the way we think and feel. So we need to work on the physiology. So to begin with, how do you feel about your voice? So there's a lot of the emotional interpretation of the way that somebody linguistically speaks about their voice. And often it can be something that's on the outside of them, whereas our voices are on the inside. So what happens when you feel disempowered? What happens when you feel anxious? What happens when you feel shy? Why are you terrified about making the speech at your daughter's wedding, et cetera, et cetera? People can be absolutely terrified. So go back to the body. So I immediately begin with breath. The breath is the door and the key to the whole process. That as soon as that human body can feel the elongation of the breath, it soothes the interior content that is rushing full of adrenaline, and the heart muscle is palpating like mad. It soothes the whole thing. As soon as we begin to expand that, we come back into what it feels like to live within these bodies. Now, if you can sound on that, just with a gentle or just doing that first, so you feel the power of the breath and the power of the sound. You don't have to speak, you don't have to think, you don't have to be impressive. Just feeling that. And then begin to speak. That's what we do when we speak, because we human beings, whatever language we speak, we always have enough breath of the thought that we use. So as a classicist, I tend to go back to Shakespeare, because Shakespeare writes in these beautifully long thoughts that require all of this breath. Thus, with imagined wing, swift scene flies in motion of no less celerity than that of thought. Suppose that you have seen the well-appointed king at Hampton Pier embark his royalty, and his brave fleet with silken streamers the young Phoebus fanning. And as soon as you do that, the person feels liberated. They feel in touch with the ease of the flow, and as a result of that, the magic of what they're starting to do effortlessly because of the flow of the breath and the sound together. They feel that it's effortless, that they don't need to work hard. It's about flowing, it's about thriving and not striving.
Before we become who we are, before we feel we've arrived, we look at other people from the past, people who have inspired us. Who inspired you when you were younger? Who did you look up to and identify with?
Well, Laurence Olivier, definitely. I had the most extraordinary drama teacher, a woman, who was so beautiful. And I always remember the quality of her contact, her eye contact, was always so focused, but never pressured, just yielding into the beauty of her eyes. And she had the most amazing voice. It was voluptuous and sensual and honeyed. And I copied her in speech because I loved the way that she would use words, that she would expand words to gain import. And she was alive with the verse of the great writers of the English language. So she could quote Shelley and Byron and Keats. And it was just so beautiful to hear how she was completely authentic. So I remember she was a South African, Iris Storer. And then, of course, when I became a young actor, there were great voices like Paul Schofield. I mean, his voice was just extraordinary, etc., etc., etc. There have been many influences. Patrick Stewart. To die for. And what a wonderful man.
Did you work with Patrick?
Yeah.
So the list goes on. You've worked with so many.
Well, I've been, I suppose, my voice teaching career is 46 years long this year. But that doesn't include the 10 years of acting. I'm of a certain age. I know I don't look it.
No, I'm still.
I'm in my 70s. So it's been a wonderfully awakened life, and started off by being very nervous and very insecure and very disempowered, and then growing and growing and growing and growing and realizing that all of the impulses that I was feeling about my playfulness just needed to be brought forth. And, my mother was always be there in the rear of my consciousness saying, darling, do as the Romans would do.
Awesome.
When in Rome, do as the Romans.
Yeah.
So there's always that social applicability. Nothing too outrageous. I don't mind what you do as long as you don't frighten the horses. I remember I used to hear her say, which is a slightly unusual. It just would make me laugh, because she was a good horsewoman, but we weren't really surrounded by a lot of horses. Well, I suppose we were, because my dad worked for the British royal family, so I was sort of steeped in all of that.
So you already had that connection.
Yeah, I mean, my mother and father were from working class backgrounds, but they were alive they were both born in the first decade. The second decade of the 20th century. And then the Second War came along. And so my dad moved from the north of England and to work in London. And of course, the war started. So he did what young men did. He became a soldier and rose through the ranks and happened to shoot a German commandant and was awarded the George Cross, you know, which was a very rare medal. It was a Medal of Honor that was given by George VI. And it just so happened that Lord Mountbatten, Louis Mountbatten, was sailing by as the Admiral of the Fleet. And my dad's commander said, "Louis, would you come and pin, Dickie, would you come and pin the medals on the men's breasts?" And there was my dad, who was astonishingly handsome.
Right.
And Lord Mountbatten saying, "And who are you? If you need a job at the end of the war, come and see me. Talk to my attaché." And my dad got the telephone number. And so at the end of war, he thought, well, this is another social aspiration. And it just so happened he got on really well with Prince Philip and was with him for 35 years before my father's untimely death. So again, the wheel of fortune just turning and presenting these wonderful opportunities. So yes, I was brought up surrounded by people who were great. The Queen, Elizabeth II. What a woman! What a woman! But also feeling rather terrified about it all because it seemed so full of responsibility, the support of heritage and of tradition and the protocols. But then learning later in life that actually that was a really great training to help me help others with the behavior of being ordinary in situations of great demand, where something great is expected of us, of being really authentic.
you know, in this world we live in today with social media, podcasts, etc., you know, fewer and fewer people are watching television. Everybody appears to be on social media. I remember John Lennon saying once upon a time he didn't let his children watch the adverts on the television with the sound on. And that really, before we met, that came back to my conscious mind, and I thought, there's something really important in sound, isn't there? The voice, music, that really penetrates the consciousness. And so our voices are all important, aren't they?
Quintessential.
Quintessential.
And in the noise of our present society, in the cognitive dissonance of this thing going on all the time like this, that something is being destroyed. We're forgetting the core of who we really are.
Do you think that's part of the attraction to going to movies, going to the theatre, that these characters that people embody are freed, even if they aren't in their personal lives, they're freed in the theatre? Do you think that's...
Well, yes. I mean, you know, that's a really interesting thesis, you know, because theatre is holding a mirror up to nature. The sort of theatre that I was once part of creating, which I consider to be great, the way that I was asked to train young actors, because, you know, one of the things that happened way back at the beginning of my career is that I was seen by one of Britain's leading drama schools, by the principal, and he asked if I would go and do some voice training. Now, I had already experienced it from one of the greatest voice coaches, but I didn't know how to formalize the whole thing. But what he said was, well, why don't you use this as your laboratory? And I was the head of voice of one of Britain's leading drama schools, the Webber Douglas Academy of Dramatic Art, which no longer exists, because when he reached a point of senior retirement, he sold the school. But the sort of quality of training, the quality of acting that we were preparing our students for then, I don't see it any longer. I really don't see it. I see a lot of egos walking around on stages. And I see people who, you know, some of them may be very beautiful or very unusual, or that they have certain idiosyncrasies that are fascinating, but I don't see the ability to transform into the character in the way that it was when I was given the bounty of watching the young Derek Jacobi, the young Ian McKellen, the young Judi Dench, the young Patrick Stewart, the young Ben Kingsley, you know, these very mature actors that we have now, who are mostly all dames or knights or whatever, because we see them as being these luminous individuals that have done good works, it's true, but have carried this moral implication of the way that we can live our lives as good people. I don't see that. I see it, this is only my own personal perspective. I see it a lot on screen. And of course, I'm judicious about what I watch. I see it a lot on streaming platforms. And I love film. I love watching it, and still work a lot in Hollywood, with less so here, but in Hollywood, with actors that know me well, you know, who are A-listers, and they're fantastic. The way that they're actually able, in the fierceness of what Hollywood is all about, in the competition and the selfishness and the narcissism, what it's all about, that they're able to actually take the opportunity of the script, of the screenplay, and allow it to become borrowed words made credible, so that they look so real as they suddenly morph into those people that they're playing. So therefore, I have a lot of time for those actors. I think they're immensely courageous. Do they have egos? Yeah, but they're in balance. You know, I mean, the ego, unfortunately, has bad press today, doesn't it?
It does.
But the ego, if we can see that the ego is a healthy identity.
I mean, it's pathologized, isn't it? When actually we need our egos to see the world, to meet the world soul.
Yeah.
But it's about uniting the ego with the world soul
Yeah.
and becoming who we are, and not getting. Otherwise, the ego becomes, as you know, it becomes too inflated, and
Yeah.
then
It
other
can be
things start to happen.
duplicitous. So we just need to be cautioned. We all need mentoring. We all need. Was that really the best thing that you could have said? Was that the highest choice? Really? It's like Timothee recently, Timothee Chalamet, who's a beautiful young actor and has proved himself as being a really sizable commodity as an actor. I mean, that's actually a rather debased way of saying it, but where's this young man going to go as he grows and grows and grows as a human being? And unfortunately, he said he devalued opera and ballet. So he's received huge criticism. Now that means that he's actually going to be tainted with that for a very long period of time through social media. That was most unfortunate. And I'd love to know more. He hasn't actually stepped forward. He's lampooned himself doing it, through social media. But he hasn't actually explained what he really meant. And, it's an interesting point, because I feel what he was talking about is the fact that that quality of experience is something which is elitist and somewhat removed from what the contemporary witness of this experience is. This fast-moving society that we live in that is in peril through the possibility of war, through the possibility of social unrest, because at the same time, where are the leaders? Where are the true voices? I feel that the present leader of the Conservative Party has the most extraordinary voice. I like listening to her. She says extraordinary things. Brave, courageous.
What can each of us do as individuals to contribute with our voices to the world?
Make love with our voices. Firstly, make love to ourselves, and then make love to others. And of course, that sounds a little bit silly. I don't literally mean. I literally mean. I don't mean be seductive and flirtatious with everybody. But why not seduce the listener into listening to you? I feel that we need to be kinder. That we need to be.
Your voice is very silky. You must have heard this a million times. Your voice is silky, very seductive, very powerful.
Well, nobody sleeps when I'm on stage. That was a line. That was another Laurence Olivier line. Right. So I've been in a position of being very personable, very informal, in very formal situations. Standing in front of large groups of actors, training young ones for the stage, 20, 25 people in a class. How can I truly serve them by being an embodiment of what they were acquiring as physical skills, as emotional skills, to enter into the wonder of the great art of theatre, the great art of acting, the actor as athlete, do you see? Becoming that consummately aware. But for the everyday person, I just feel that we need to be more loving. The way that I sound is not the way my brother sounds. It's very unique.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with the way he sounds the way that he sounds. The way that I sound is something that I've created because it soothes me. I have a lot of fire. And if you're not careful with earthing that fire, that passion, the rage that I can feel moving through me when I'm upset about gross things taking place in the world or in my presence. I'm a warrior. I will step forward and say, was that the best thing you could do? That fire can burn me. So what I've done over the years is to develop a sound that soothes me. And if it soothes me, it's going to soothe others. That sounds slightly masturbatory, but I'm sure you understand what I mean.
I do see what you're saying.
It's not about self-aggrandizement. It's not about narcissism. It's just about how can I be effective as a human being that I'm always being true, that I'm always being loving, that I'm always being caring, that I'm always being altruistic. As Diana would say, do as you would be done by. But that doesn't make me a pushover.
No.
If somebody's naughty in my presence, I'm the first person to find a way of saying, really? Whoever they may be.
So we each have a signature, don't we? I mean, now with the new technology of, accessing all kinds of things, banking, etc., we all have a signature to our voice, a bit like a fingerprint.
Yeah, totally.
It's amazing.
And your note is your note. No other human being has your note. It's completely unique, just like your fingerprint or your DNA. Your voice identity is unique. And I'm going to slightly bastardize or paraphrase this phrase. It was given to us by Benjamin Disraeli, who was a very effective prime minister during Queen Victoria's reign, and I think served on a number of occasions and was a great influence for the Queen. And he said that the voice was a key to the character of the person. That's really what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see? And our note always comes through the center of the geometry of us. So, for example, if you think of my range here on a horizontal, like a piano, like a keyboard, we know the keyboard that organizes the whole of Western classical music, the diatonic scale, has a middle. If I talk with my treble like this, just play with the right hand, that's where I go. In a moment, you're going to say, why are you so anxious? I feel the little boy coming up inside that feels fearful. If I go all the way down here like this, there's possibility of two things happening. You're probably going to fall asleep, or you're going to be very concerned about my monotonic delivery. But if I play with both hands, you get a mixture of the treble and the bass together, take the horizontal, make it vertical, put it into your spine, there's the middle. So if words arise from the heart, they enter the heart. And then there are all sorts of physical things that one can do through breath, through sound, to really feel that location. I don't work intellectually on, so what you need is this pitch, because it's a feeling, do you see?
Yeah.
Meaning that the note is a frequency as a pitch. But what's interesting in our bodies is that when the note moves into the physiology of our bodies, the chambers of our bodies resonate the note. Resonance is an amplification of the initial note. And so tone is developed. Now, if all of our vowel sounds are really squeezed like that, you don't get a melody really happening. Well, you do, but it's all on one level. But if you're really using the vowel sounds like that,
more rounded,
it becomes a huge power.
Yeah. We focus so heavily on the external image these days. People are becoming more egoic, more narcissistic, more anxious about their image. But of course, things can look right, but without an authentic voice, there's something.
It's all imbalanced, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all imbalanced. We're not integrated physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. We're just working on the narcissism of the way we look.
Yeah.
And most beautiful people don't know they look beautiful.
Yeah.
I've worked with some extraordinarily beautiful people, including some of the top models of the world. They don't know they're beautiful, so they compensate by using aggressive egos. They become bitches, the negative feminine,
right,
and manipulative. Well, finally, what's going to happen is that you're going to meet an impasse. Somebody's not going to employ you, relationships are going to disintegrate, etc., etc. So if we can really be truthful about integrating the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, that's really the meaning of the word integrity, isn't it? That we live our lives with integrity, both vis-a-vis ourselves and also the world, so that we communicate ourselves with integrity.
Yeah.
It's just that we become such great ego liars. That's really what we're seeing in the world in some of the principal leadership capacities, like Mr. Trump, for example. We all know that he lies. He has other qualities, but at the same time, we know that he's not true. But our world is so splintered that we need him to remind ourselves that we are also splintered and that we need to heal. And once we heal, we will have somebody who is integrated before us. He's reminding us of our own shadow.
Yeah.
And particularly in relation to the diminution of the feminine archetype. So it's a huge subject, you see, that we're talking about. But I believe fundamentally our voice is at the very core of it.
Stewart Pearce, thank you. Pleasure.
It's been wonderful sitting here with you and having this conversation. Thank you. I hope it's been lucid.